In December 2015, I attended the Urbana Missions Conference in St. Louis, Missouri. This conference took place in the time period when the Black Lives Matter movement was just starting to take place. One of the speakers at the conference was Michelle Higgins, a civil rights activist with an evangelical background. Higgins spoke about the call for Christians to step outside of our comfort zones in order to approach difficult subjects, asking the audience, "What is your goal in only doing activism that makes you comfortable?" In addition to this charge, Higgins challenged listeners' thinking with this excerpt from her speech. "We can wipe out the adoption crisis tomorrow. We could wipe it out this week, but we're too busy arguing to have abortion banned. We're too busy arguing to defund Planned Parenthood. We are too busy withholding mercy from the living so that we may display a big spectacle of how much we want mercy to be shown to the unborn. Where is your mercy?" While the goal of this line of thinking is not to say banning abortion is a bad thing, it gets more to the root of the matter of being selectively pro-life. In our society today, there are so many people who need to be shown mercy, but we pick and choose who gets to be cared for and who's on their own. I will discuss the problem with this selectivism, as well as back up this information with how Jesus ran his ministry. Being pro-life has become one of the biggest values Christians have used in recent times to define their political and social views. While this is not a problem fundamentally, the way it is executed leaves many groups out of that protection and advocacy. One of the largest examples of what I'm talking about here is the overwhelming apathy towards the number of refugees searching for shelter in our country. For being a country built upon immigration and melding cultures together, we have become very quick to decide who can and who can't be a part of that. In addition to this, the desire for such strict borders goes against what Jesus calls us to do for our fellow man. In Matthew 25, verse 35 through 40, Jesus tells his disciples regarding the final judgment, "He will say to the righteous, 'I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you invited me in.' Then the righteous ones will reply, 'Lord, when did we ever see you hungry and we fed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink, or a stranger and show you hospitality?' And the king will say, 'I tell you the truth, what you did to the least of these, my brothers and sisters, you were doing it to me.'" This piece of scripture is often overlooked as being one of the most simple commands of Jesus to carry out, but it is rarely fulfilled in the way he intended. Now, this is not me trying to say to those who are strong advocates against abortion that they're incorrect. However, that is only one small part of advocating for the living. Going back to the words of Michelle Higgins, we're forgetting how to show mercy to those in front of us in order to make a big spectacle of showing it to the unborn. One example of this is the adoption crisis. If the efforts which are put in to defund Planned Parenthood were instead put into funding adoption efforts and finding homes for all those children, there would no longer be a crisis. Rather than demonizing these organizations, if we instead stepped alongside them to help in a Christian way, we would be able to bring great change. Another important group to consider in the situation are the mothers being denied abortions or being chastised for making the decision. According to the World Health Organization, between 700 and 1,200 women die from childbirth or pregnancy complications. Within that statistic, Black women are 3 to 4 times more likely to die from these complications than white women. In other words, women of color, in addition to women in poverty, are affected most by restrictions placed on abortion. It is not always unwanted pregnancies that result in abortion. There are also many factors that can lead a woman to that decision. If the pregnancy threatens the life of the mother if carried out full term, it becomes a choice of the life of the mother or the life of the baby. Unfortunately, the decision has to be made sometimes to save one life or risk losing both. A better way to categorize this line of thinking is anti-abortion rather than pro-life. If we all were truly advocating for human life, we would be more outraged with the current status of our country, let alone the world today. In very recent times, immigrant children are being forcibly taken away from their parents and family, all because they came to this country for a better life. Families are being torn apart because our lawmakers have determined they hold the power to choose one life over another. So, overall, the main point I want to hold to is that we Christians need to reevaluate who it is we are benefiting with our values and what the outcome of these decisions ultimately is. When I attended Urbana 3 years ago, Michelle Higgins gave me the words I now use to measure my level of advocacy by. What is your goal in only doing activism that makes you comfortable? A while back, when I wrote my informative speech, I talked about a quote from Benjamin Franklin, and I believe it also relates to this situation as well. Benjamin Franklin once said, "Justice will not be served until those who are unaffected are as outraged as those who are." I'm not saying you don't have to give up your stance on abortion to be able to see that change needs to come in the way we value human life and all that encompasses it. This means caring for those physically living in the world now, just as we do for those who have yet to enter the world. All lives are precious, and it is our call as Christians to recognize and enforce that. Thank you.